Hello, role-playing people, and at the request of quite a few long-time subscribers, I'm going to share a few thoughts on a potential anniversary edition for Demon the Fallen, even though such an edition will probably never be released. I'm going to talk about what I'd like to see in any new Demon book and how I'd approach adapting Demon to 20th anniversary standards, what I'd change and what I'd keep. The very first thing I want to start off with is that allocating the first 100 pages of a core book to the history of the Fallen, basically the history of creation as told by a single character who just so happens to be a manipulative devil, talking about the past in as much detail as possible, viewed and explained only, or rather predominantly, from an evangelical or a pseudo-scientifical perspective, doesn't seem to be the right approach. Personally, I love the introductory fiction of Demon. I think it's really well written, but especially for a new edition which builds on the previous one, which already has fans and it has something to stand on right off the get-go, I'd focus more on the here and now setting as opposed to the history of creation, because beautiful writing alone, especially regarding things that are long since past, doesn't give players and storytellers the tools they need to create a meaningful, rich game experience in a contemporary setting. By comparison, Vampire 20th gives us a lot of what we need to know about the setting, the moods and themes, general rules of play, the sects with a sum up of their laws and practices, titles, roles within those sects, and even explanations about a vampire's generation and such. Some core elements of the game in a mere 50 pages. And the majority of what we read in those 50 pages is of immediate use to players and storytellers, giving them a solid set of general rules, a good amount of explanations, and a reliable narrative frame in which to create their chronicles, which is a very good approach. Players often want to know right off the bat what types of stories can they tell. What kind of characters are we going to play? And more often than not, what are the lovely, lovely superpowers our characters have at their disposal? Not only does Demon postpone giving us that information, but the fiction it insists we read takes up so much space that a lot of the essential explanations of systems, details regarding current setting, and game-changing mechanics needed to be moved to other supplement books, which is absolutely ridiculous from my point of view. It's a 300-page core book, and when you put all of the flavor texts and narrative inserts together, you realize almost half the book is just short stories and novellas to the detriment of very important information, like how courts of the Fallen work and are structured, or a detailed explanation of the Eminence background, the phases a Fallen goes through after possessing a mortal, or a short list of resources that factions have at their disposal. Basically, the entire political and societal system of demons is completely absent from the core book and is instead found in City of Angels, which is a 120-page city book containing predominantly ready-made characters and intrigues, but in a mere 20 pages, which can be found at the very end of this supplement, we're given details about the courts and the pentarchy which supports them, the 5 ministries, the Eminence background explained in detail, and all of the titles within the Society of the Fallen, the way subjects of various factions interact with each other within a city, and even information about the renegades, those who oppose the courts for various reasons. These 20 pages absolutely should have been in the core book because they completely change the relations between the 5 factions. They make any would-be Society of the Fallen much more cohesive, while bringing in a very tasteful dimension of political play and courtly politics. Why this isn't in the core book is beyond me. In the player's guide, we have some very, very useful information about what happens after possession, all of the phases a character goes through as they begin to understand what they are and accept their newfound nature. Of course, I'm referring to distortion, dissociation, reconstruction, and rebirth. Ironically, this information is covered in a mere 2 pages, and it changes the way players see their preludes and early chronicle interactions. This is, again, from my point of view, essential information. It changes the way people interact with the game. Then we have brief explanations for standard apocalyptic forms, custom forms, merits and flaws. Oh yes, by the way, the merits and flaws of Demon are only found in the player's guide, along with the expanded items and crafting system, plus the rituals of the Fallen. So it's quite annoying to me how so many new and interesting mechanics were excluded from the core book in favor of flavor text. And make no mistake, I'm all for flavor. I love reading lore, but I'd rather get a whole game first, a complete, mechanically sound toolkit for running games in a certain setting, than to read this really gorgeous biblical fiction and then realize, oh yeah, well the history's great, the setting is killer, but the mechanics are busted and incomplete, so running this game is going to be such a pain, most people aren't even gonna try it. Very sad. Next, let's talk about the Storyteller's Companion, which offers so much solid information regarding factions, and it offers so many plot hooks and story hooks, it literally makes your Demon Chronicle run itself. You barely have to put in any effort or spend countless hours on creative endeavors to run a basic, by-the-book Demon game while playing right into the flavor of each faction. That's how useful the companion is. There is a splendid dance between the factions in this game, something that comes in waves, interactions that are so intense they threaten to knock you down and drag you into the depths, or pleasantly, peacefully withdraw after having given a mere hint or a suggestion of the tsunami that might follow, but is, for now, a gentle wave that caresses your feet and ankles. So, going by the core book alone, any reader would have a completely different impression. So there's these demons, right? And they're organized into factions, right? Except reconcilers are the goody two-shoes no one can stand, cryptics are sneaky and avoidant so they don't do much, Luciferans are strict but stubborn and short-sighted, Faustians are greedy hoarders of faith, and Raveners want to burn everything. How do they interact with each other? Well, going by the core book, they are almost openly aggressive to each other, so a lot of the readers, myself included, initially, assumed you can't have a multi-faction game because the protagonists are just going to kill each other. If that were the case, it would result in very limited story possibilities, very little flavor or diversity within those factions, and overall, a very monotone group dynamic and a boring game in which everyone needs to be on the same page and have the same goals. But no, this couldn't be further from the truth. Factions actively seek courts as places where one can observe the other factions and gather information on them. The Luciferans consider it their duty to create such forms of government and protect other fallen from the depredations of the Earthbound, so factions do end up interacting without resorting to immediate aggression, and we realize they are nuanced societies which have a wide array of tools and strategies at their disposal. The Raveners, or Raveners, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, they are not idiotic murder hobos, but more like a secret society of assassins who seek to undo what they consider a grave mistake, right? The Luciferans aren't just short-sighted children waiting for Daddy Lucifer to come back and save them, but a complex military and administrative body which actively creates courts in various cities in the hopes of expanding their influence, maintaining some semblance of peace between warring factions, and of course getting other fallen on their side, converting and recruiting others to their cause. So they're awesome. No one is going to handle names better than cryptics, which are the most disorganized group, but their individual members are really good at what they do, getting info, keeping tabs, studying targets while laying low, requesting syllables and names from their librarians, because they have access to that. They are not just passive, inconsequential wimps, despite their lack of clear direction. Their information can completely change the outcome of a prolonged battle against an Earthbound, for instance. Information is power. For Faustians, faith is power. Can you just imagine the raw potency of Faustian rituals and evocations fueled by dozens of pacts? Merciful heavens, they have so much faith at their disposal that they are the only faction who is aware that rewriting reality is an option. Amazing. And reconcilers, we can see them as diplomats or challengers of the ways, those who keep a close eye on mortals. They are a faction which is despised by many, but has very powerful artifacts at its disposal. The factions need each other, even when they compete, even when they think they want to destroy and control one another. And obviously they want that to some degree, but they need each other. And the core book doesn't present any of this lovely nuance right here, a nuance which opens up the chronicle to so many memorable interactions and characters and situations. That being said, to me, this is a huge loss. And like I've said before, the core book is really not enough. So the very first thing I would do for a 20th anniversary Demon is to gather and include all information and mechanics available and see exactly where the game stands after that. This is a very important step. Having talked about the presence or absence of essential information from the core book, let's have a look at how Demon presents information. And regarding this matter, the first thing I want to mention is that the writing in Demon the Fallen is clearly a product of its time, and is further shaped by the individual biases of the writers. There's a notorious passage in the core book in which a character says that people with autism are not only more vulnerable to possession, but their souls are untethered properly and they are unable to exert free will, which would indicate that they cannot be seduced into making a pact and are quite helpless before the fallen, which is obviously stupid. It is misinformed, a needlessly dramatic and judgmental view, and indicates the writer's own biases and beliefs, which I don't need to make my own in order to play this game. What I want from an RPG is a fun narrative frame and solid mechanics which allow me to tell a memorable, fun story with my friends. Playing an RPG is a creative endeavor and a performative hobby. We, the group, bring the setting to life and we decide how we portray our characters. If one of the authors who wrote the game included their own misinformed biases in the book, or even wrote something controversial intentionally, just for shock value, I can easily recognize that for what it is, realize it is ultimately inconsequential for my game and even the setting overall, and just ignore it. Because statements like, oh yes, you can't make a pact with a ginger person because they have no souls, Statements like these are puerile, misinformed, and I won't say offensive necessarily, but judgmental, based on the biased impression of some whoever somewhere. It's 2024 now, the game came out in the early 2000s, so obviously there's going to be certain things I strongly disagree with in the books, things that are insensitive and such. But should I throw away an awesome game because of those things? No, absolutely not. I'll throw away precisely the things I disagree with because I can just acknowledge that I disagree with the writer's opinions, and if said opinions don't affect the narrative frame to a larger degree, I can ignore them and bring in my own opinions and sensibilities. Like I said, playing an RPG is a performative hobby. I bring that world to life according to my own intentions. That being said, and this applies to any piece of writing which brings into discussion real people, conditions, and cultures, not just for a potential new edition of Demon, but in general, I encourage everyone to stay away from judgy, unfounded, biased statements. No good ever comes out of them, and they do not contribute to the setting. They only detract from it. Oh yes, you're Romanian, so in this RPG you get +2 to pickpocketing because, we all know you're Romanians. That's so stupid. That's so stupid. No, we're not a nation of pickpocketing thieves. The insensitive and misinformed generalizations regarding everyone need to just end already. Move on. Obviously, any new edition of Demon should be playtested thoroughly, it should be mechanically sound, the rules should be phrased clearly, even if they aren't to everyone's liking, but they should at least be clear so we know what we're dealing with. Evocations should be a pleasure to use, giving the players active tools with which to influence the game world and the story being told, but we should also take into account the culture which inspired a certain setting. See, there's this recurring question I see on forums or on Reddit: how Christian is Demon the Fallen? Why is it so Christian? Wouldn't players like to see demonic entities from more faiths and cultures around the globe included in the game? Why is the game so uninclusive? This is a topic I will explore in detail in another episode, in which we will present precisely all the non-Abrahamic inspirations behind Demon the Fallen, which are quite a few. But for now, what I want to say is the core of the game is biblical myth and Paradise Lost. Yes, at its core, Demon is obviously inspired by biblical myth, both canonical and apocryphal sources related to Genesis, original sin, the fall of both man and angel, all of that stuff, along with a solid dose of John Milton. And in more modern media, we can see it drew inspiration from C.S. Lewis's Screwtape Letters, William Peter Blatty's The Exorcist, but mostly Legion, Gaiman's American Gods, The Devil's Advocate, starring Al Pacino and Keanu Reeves, excellent movie, American Gothic, The Prophecy, 1995, Christopher Walken as Gabriel and Viggo Mortensen as Lucifer, very Demon the Fallen, not too great a movie, but it works. So you see, these are the sources Demon plays into at its core, because they are a part of the game's identity, its biggest inspirations. You strip these away, you lose that identity. But I do believe throughout developing this game, the writers became aware that it is a little too boxed in, too culturally limited, if we can call it that, and they understood the need to open up the concept and make things more abstract. They didn't see that intention to fruition completely, but they clearly started taking steps in that direction. The Player's Guide encourages players to name and inspire their characters from a plethora of different myths and cultures, with some merits allowing your apocalyptic form to resemble that of a creature of myth. Any myth. The actual angelic names fall out of use along with the disappearance of the loyal host. Terms like God are gradually replaced by more abstract descriptors, my favorite being the one used in Days of Fire. In this book, the creator is referred to as the Great Giver, she, the Great Giver. So we're not talking about a biblical father of creation who goes around punishing anyone who disobeys him, but a gentle mother who gave so much of herself to bestow upon everyone this experience of being that she supposedly died at birth. I do believe, according to Bible-believing Christian standards, Demon the Fallen is blasphemous, really, or heretical at least. It went off the strictly biblical fiction path and began including more, or at least allowing the players to bring in more aesthetics and character concepts according to their own sensibilities. Ultimately, a lot of the history of creation described, along with the existence of these celestial beings, predates human consciousness. I'll say that again for emphasis. The protagonists in Demon the Fallen predate human consciousness, human societies, cultures, languages, myths, and folklore. I know a lot of people would like to see an even more abstract, or maybe abstract isn't the right term, a more inclusive Demon the Fallen. But guess what? It's already here. It's up to you to flavor a demon character with culture and folklore, which are again elements that appeared long after the fall. I know Changeling the Dreaming tried to include as many new kits as possible in 20th anniversary, but guess what? Real-life cultures, myth and folklore are so diverse, they're so numerous. You genuinely cannot include everything. As a Changeling player, I can complain about there not being the Romanian Sânziene. Mentioned in the book, there are no Sânziene, and I can blame the game of being uninclusive, or I can just homebrew them in and make my own. I can write in my own Sânziene changelings based on my own sensibilities and cultural knowledge. Again, it's so easy to write in new elements and include new mechanics or character creation options. You don't even have to change the old ones. You don't have to replace them. Ultimately, your attitude towards the game is what's going to keep it Christian-centered or open up the setting and the character creation options to be multicultural and inclusive. The core book alone shows only the essence of Demon, biblical myth, and Milton, as mentioned before. But it's so much more than that. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm open to the possibility of being wrong here, but wholeheartedly, I think just by expanding the Demon the Fallen lexicon to include more varied terms, not just God, angel, etc., we can really bring out something the writers were already working towards, an ambiguity that is already there, and which is letting the player make more decision in regards to their character's history and personality. There might be only 7 archetypal houses, but your creativity is boundless, and your sources of inspiration bring a distinct flavor to any demon game. So bring that into the game without fear. Bring it! You want your protagonist to present like a Rakshasa or Raktabij or some Asura? Go for it! You want it to be more of an Oni, a Tengu, or some yokai. Why not? Bring more of your own sensibilities into Demon, because the archetypes allow it, and it will be an awesome experience for everyone. There's custom forms in the player's guide. The memory of your Fallen is filtered and modified by the memory of the host. If you look at it this way, all the signature characters of Demon belong to various cultures and races, they just happen to be in the States. So again, the example is clear. The power is yours. You decide what, but also how your protagonist remembers creation and how they act as a result of that. So I think these really are the most pressing things on my list. At least they stem from recurring questions I see online. And as you can tell, I wouldn't rewrite much, because I already like what Demon has to offer, and I think a lot of the fixes are already there. They're just spread across all these different books, so they're not very visible. What I would do is collect all of the setting stuff and mechanics in one book. I would emphasize some more abstract terms and perspectives without removing the core identity of Demon. I would get rid of the insensitive, judgy attitude of some writers. This 100%, there's no doubt about this one. Polish up the mechanics to where they are functional and fun. And, oh yeah, don't force the reader to go through over 100 pages of fiction first. No, it's a core book. Let's talk setting and mechanics. The beautiful, beautiful fiction can be put somewhere else. I hope you're satisfied with my answer for now, and I hope I presented my opinions in a way that makes sense. I'm well aware it might be a personal defect or bias, since I love reading and myths and folklore and theology and all of that. So I might have a tendency to boil everything down to common archetypes or wider, more abstract categories. So I can see the archetype of the playful water spirit or the tonic god of decay as a serving angel of one almighty god, or as the servant of a gentle giver, just as well as I can see it as part of a pantheon in a polytheistic frame. Same for vampire, same for mage, same for changeling and werewolf. I see a real archetype within the fictional setting, but in a variety of forms, under different names, reskinned or reinterpreted, and my experience so far has shown me good characters need to be complex and interesting and distinct. So that's how I will probably always play them. Details make all the difference, and details are pretty much always within the domain and the power of the player. It's within your power to create. Keep the core of the archetype and fill in the juicy details according to your own sensibilities and inspirations. That's what I do. So the oh so much accused Christian-centrism of Demon doesn't deter me from playing this game and having an absolute blast, including characters inspired from all faiths and myths. But yeah, that's my take on some, let's say, central issues any would-be Demon 20th Anniversary Edition should address, should take into account. Thank you very much for listening. Take care, have fun, and don't forget to play.